Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Washington. It was only about a week ago or so when the Greek debt negotiations were settled and the Greek parliament passed new austerity measures that the financial markets around the world greeted all of this with great glee. The euro went up, the markets went up. Now a week later, the euro is taking a major dive and the crisis has spread to Italy and further. Now joining us to talk about all of this is Tom Ferguson. Tom teaches at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. He's also a senior fellow at the Roosevelt Institute. Thanks for joining us again, Tom.
Hi there.
So like 1 week from highs to crashes. What's going on there?
Well, a couple things here. First of all, everybody's second take on the Greek bill, its passage, the realization is widespread that they, in fact, will never pay these debts off, that the interest rates being asked and the growth, the consequences for growth of the foolish austerity programs the European Union's been demanding means that Greece is going to get crushed. And people don't think, and I think very rationally, they've quickly realized that the internal resistance in Greece to this is strong enough that it will probably bust through pretty soon. The other thing that's probably in the very short run even more controlling is that as the realization has grown that the whole thing's breaking down, resistance to continued transfers among the governments in Germany, in Austria, in the Netherlands, in Finland, and elsewhere has risen a lot. And in effect, the political resistance to continued payments, large payments out there, is growing faster than their ability to contain the crisis. That's the latest element in this was the Italian finance minister, Mr. Tremonti. Turned out to be living in an elite apartment in Rome. He was apparently being provided free by one of his former associates. And that's weakened him politically. It's also clear that the Berlusconi government in Italy is, for the first time, in some serious political trouble, and so it's not willing to continue down sort of a Greek path of huge austerity. And Italy's a big economy, so the result is that everybody's getting scared about the status of Italian debt. And so for Italy's debt to run in the middle of a Greek crisis, and you have to also understand that everybody can see that the other countries on the periphery that are in trouble, that's Portugal and Ireland for sure, and probably Spain, too, they're all going to want deals like Greece. So basically what's happening is the total bill is rising exponentially. The willingness to bear the retrenchment costs in the periphery's grown hugely, and the political support for those payments across the larger, richer countries is just dissolving.
Now, by payments, what exactly are you talking about?
I mean transfers. I mean the real story.
Transfers from and to.
Now, the real story. It looks like Germany, the Netherlands, and other countries are bailing out Greece. What's actually happening is they hand the money to the Greeks, who then hand the money to French and German and other large European banks. This is really a backdoor bank bailout in disguise. The whole thing here is happening. I mean, it's not quite right to say that this is all happening because the European Union has a bad organizational structure. It does have a bad organizational structure, and the European politicians have been about as far-seeing and active in dealing with this as the American politicians were before 2008 on dealing with our financial bubble. But in truth, it's the unwillingness to confront the banks and the demands that they have no haircuts, as they say. I mean, that is to say, real cuts in the debt payments that is bringing this whole show down. And everybody is waking up to this fact, and so you see people dumping bank shares in Europe. You see U.S. authorities looking around, trying to figure out, like a lot of American firms seem to have sold, surprise, surprise, credit default swap protection to some European banks. The Fed and the Treasury confess they don't know who is on the hook for what. This is after we passed Dodd-Frank, after we did financial reform. So you have the makings here of a truly gigantic mess, and potential layman in reverse if you were to actually allow some European bank to fail. Now, nobody believes the Europeans will actually do that. But what they have been desperately trying to do is conceal the extent of the payments they are making to their own banks from their population. That sort of disguise is wearing through. That's
so
what
and even though the longer term consequences of all this austerity will be deepened depression, their only short term interest is make sure the banks don't take a bigger haircut.
That's right. You can't be blunter than this when the European Central Bank, which also is affected by this. The European Central Bank's now holding a ton of bad debt. And yeah, it'll undoubtedly be sort of in the position of the French Central Bank was in 1931 when sterling went down. It actually had to be, the French Central Bank had to be recapitalized by its government.
So if people keep bailing from the euro, I guess they're going to buy more American T-bills. The irony of all that. But
it's lovely, isn't it? I mean, all the folks in America who keep telling you we have to reassure financial markets while we have financial markets sitting around buying enormous amounts, including today, of American treasuries. Yeah, it's a wonderful life.
So what do you make of the U.S. Treasury and government response to all this? And what would be a U.S. Treasury government response that would actually might be in the interests of most Americans?
Well, the first thing, of course, is they've got to find out who's exposed to what over on this side of the water there. I mean, that's just ridiculous that they don't know, okay? But the sort of larger problem is twofold. One is, in Toronto, the Americans threw in, at the G20 meetings last year, the Americans threw in with the European demands for austerity. The sort of worldwide press for austerity is simply killing growth. It's making it impossible to pay any of these debts, and it's just enlarging deficits around the world. So in that sense, our guys are not helping the matter by talking like the biggest problem in the world is budget cutting. It's not. It's getting employment. That's the big problem. The other thing they need to do is to drop their opposition to haircuts to the banks. I mean, Geithner's been on the phone. People know it. It's out in the press. The U.S. has opposed haircuts for the European banks in the case of Greece, less because there's much American interest in that, although there's probably some American credit default swap protection exposure, but because they know that the thing will eventually be extended to Ireland, and there the American banks do have exposure. And I am sure that, as it spreads wider into Europe, that the potential exposure would grow in other countries too. It's not helpful for the U.S. to sort of be supporting the European Central Bank's Maginot Line defense against bank haircuts. These guys are going to have to take hits. These debts can never be paid. They have got to do, at minimum, a kind of Brady bond redo of the debt program. And if you remember that case from the 1980s on Latin America, two things had to happen for that to happen. One was you had to have the transition from Reagan to Bush, get even a new administration, and then the other ones were riots in Latin America.
Well, I think when the people of the world start to more get what's going on here, maybe they already do, they're going to be looking for scalps, not haircuts. Thanks for joining us, Tom. Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.